Shine.
It's Graham Liver at breakfast.
BBC Radio Lancashire.
But before that, at 7 minutes after 8, could fracking be coming back to Lancashire? Just days before the government announces its energy strategy, it's ordered a new report to see if it could be done safely. The process was temporarily banned in the UK in 2019 after the country's only operational fracking site caused a number of earth tremors on the Fylde coast. Well, last month, the energy firm Quadrilla were due to decommission the site. Now, fracking in Lancashire has become a possibility once more. But what do local residents think? Here's Barbara Richardson, a member of Frack Free Lancashire.
My initial thoughts are the government are doing it to try and appease a fairly small minority of MPs who think that fracking can actually alleviate the energy crisis. And it's absolute nonsense. It can't, it won't. And if Quadrilla are so certain that they can get around the problems, why haven't they done it in the last 2.5 years? When they've had the opportunity to prove that it can be done, it can't. The bottom line is it cannot be done safely, it cannot be done sustainably, and it certainly isn't supported by the residents, by the community. Considering Quadrilla had only fracked 2 wells and they caused so many earthquakes, well, a lot of tremors and then bigger and bigger earthquakes, they were getting more and more intense and more frequent. That, how can they do it safely? You cannot frack without causing earthquakes, and you cannot control an earthquake. No one knows what damage it would do underneath the ground or above the ground.
Well, that's Barbara Richardson. The Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, insisted that the government must be led by the science in its approach to fracking and said it will remain banned unless it's shown to be safe, sustainable and have minimal disturbance to those living and working nearby. But he added that following the invasion of Ukraine, ministers should look at all possible domestic energy sources. Labour says the new report has nothing to do with the energy needs and everything to do with the Conservatives bowing to their backbenchers. The Conservative MP for the Fylde is Mark Menzies.
I'm frustrated because, quite frankly, the well at Preston Road is not viable. I wish people would stop saying it's viable. It's not. If it was viable, it would not have triggered a national moratorium. It wouldn't be a situation where we're having to look at something that is, quite frankly, a danger to the public. And as for Conservative backbenchers being in favour of this, they are an unrepresentative rump. They're the kind of people that when fracking was actually going on, didn't know it was going on because they were so obsessed with Brexit or trying to get rid of Theresa May. So these are people that, quite frankly, are not representative of the Conservative Party. They're also not people that actually have fracking anywhere near them. So it's very good for them in theory to say, isn't it great, we've got all this gas. But they don't understand the realities, the practicalities, and quite frankly, get up here, speak to people, understand what's going on, then form your opinion.
So this rump of the Conservative Party, do you talk to them? Do you say, listen, I've had this on my patch and I know what happens?
Yeah, but Graham, these aren't the kind of people you can talk to. They are people that, quite frankly, they make their mind up, and once their mind's made up, they don't listen to anyone about anything.
These are your Conservative colleagues you're talking about here, Mark.
Yeah, a very tiny number of my Conservative colleagues, a very tiny number. And let's be quite frank on this. The Secretary of State spoke to myself and other Lancashire colleagues yesterday and made it crystal clear that what is going on now is actually the logical follow-on from last week's announcement of the delaying of the cementing up of these 2 wells. This is a desktop exercise that's taking place, and it's looking to see had anything changed. You don't need to be an expert to work out the geology that caused these seismic events, one of which was 2.9. Let's not forget the regulations which I fought for, which the industry signed up to. Quadrilla happily signed up to the traffic light system. They happily said that they could do fracking safely, that they would not trigger anything above a 0.5 event. In reality, they were triggering events at 2.1, 2.3, and after fracking stopped, we got an event of 2.9 on the Richter scale. So when you speak to Quadrilla, I think the question you ask them is not, is there gas underground? I think we can all accept there is gas there. It is, can you do it safely? Can you do it within the regulations that you yourself signed up to? And the answer is no, they can't. So therefore, fracking cannot be done.
Mark Menzies there. Well, let's speak to Quadrilla. Let's speak to their chief executive, Francis Egan, who joins us live on Breakfast this morning. Francis, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you answer Mark Menzies' questions?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, he certainly didn't sound like a man who had made up his mind and wasn't listening to anybody else, as he accused his Conservative colleagues of, I have to say, in that discussion. Of course, the wells at Preston New Road, which he says are not viable. I don't know what his technical qualifications are, but I can assure you they are viable. I can also tell you that the scientific study, the scientific evidence that the government claims it's following was actually initiated 6 months after the moratorium. So far from the science being led by the science didn't get initiated by the government. The studies into the wells weren't launched until March 2020, with the moratorium being announced in November 19. And those studies concluded that the vast majority of what your first contributor calls earthquakes were imperceptible. So she must have amazing perception to have perceived them. And the 2.9 event that has exercised Menzies created ground vibrations half the level typically allowed from a construction site. So I think some facts have been brought to bear since the moratorium was announced. And frankly, I'm amazed that it takes 3 months for them to actually review this and say it is safe.
So in the past 2 years, have you found a revolutionary new method of fracking that's safe? Because you couldn't even stick to your agreed traffic light system, could you?
The 0.5, described by Liverpool University as the equivalent of sitting on an office chair, Graham, so sit heavily on your office chair, was accepted by us on the basis that it would be reviewed over time and amended. It was never reviewed over time, and now is the time to review it. And that was the basis that we and other industry members, far from happily, with effectively a gun to our head saying that unless you can't do anything in this country, agreed to it. But it's time to look at it. On the basis of that constructed in this country, you have to ban the RAF for Trevor over the northwest the last 3 months, sonic boom, shut down most of the train system in this country. So it's either the country wants to develop its own, or it doesn't pretend that it can't be done safely.
Francis, I'm afraid the phone line, I'm afraid, Francis, is really, really bad. I'm going to try to ask you a few more questions. Try not to move or try to move near a window if you can.
I apologise.
No, it's fine. Oh, no, that's working now. So has the... let's ask that question again because you couldn't really hear it. As I said, in the past 2 years, have you found a revolutionary new method of fracking that's safe? Because you couldn't stick to your agreed traffic light system, could you? You agreed to this system. You couldn't stick to it. Have you found a revolutionary new method of making fracking safe?
Well, there is no need to find a revolutionary new method. The method is safe. The traffic light system at 0.5, as I was trying to say to you, is equivalent to sitting down on an office chair, and we signed up to it on the basis it would be reviewed over time and amended to an appropriate level. So if you were to stick with that, of course, you'd have to shut down most of the industry in the country. So there is no need to find some new revolutionary method. There is just a need to have the same regulations applied to fracking as you apply to construction, as you apply to geothermal, as you apply to transport.
Are you saying now that people in Lancashire just have to put up with it now to improve our energy security?
Well, people in Lancashire just have to put up with their gas bills going through the roof. And we were assured that would never happen by the government. We were told there was plentiful cheap gas available in the world. We argued that it was insecure and not safe to be relying on foreign imports of gas, and we were told we were silly. That hasn't proved to be the case. So decisions need to be made, clearly.
But it's going to be a let's say fracking starts again. It's going to be a very, very, very long time before we see a change in our energy bills from fracking.
Well, it's going to be a time before you see a change in your energy bills from nuclear power stations, onshore wind, offshore wind, hydrogen. The energy policy, frankly, of this country has been a mess, and it's going to take some time to unwind that. But I think it's time that we realise we need to secure our own domestic supplies of gas, which everybody recognises will be needed for decades to come.
Very quickly, in a statement yesterday, which you put out, you cited a questionable claim from 8 years ago that Russia is actively engaged in anti-fracking groups. Do you really believe that?
Well, it wasn't my claim. It was the NATO Security General who made that claim. So I was quoting him, not me.
Yeah, but that is an unsubstantiated claim by him.
Well, I'm sure you'll have to ask him how he substantiated it, and not me. It's not my quote; it's his quote. But I can tell you that having been described on Russia Today and UK television as the moral equivalent of paedophiles gives you some indication of where Russia was in the whole debate.
Why are you bringing paedophiles in here?
Because on Russia Today, the presenters on Russia Today described Quadrilla and other frackers as the modern equivalent of paedophiles.
Right. Do you think this was suitable to put it in your press release, this?
Absolutely suitable to put in the press release. Of course. Why do you think the NATO Secretary-General said it?
But, the linking anti-fracking groups in Lancashire, someone like Barbara Richardson, who I'm not going to speak for Barbara, but I imagine is someone who is not known for protesting, and you're linking her to Vladimir Putin.
I didn't link anybody to Vladimir Putin. I think you should read the press release.
Do you really think you're going to get people on your side by being like this?
Being like what, sorry?
Some may say slightly aggressive.
I don't think so, no. I'm merely defending my corner from accusations that I'm somehow linking Barbara Richardson to Vladimir Putin. I would certainly wouldn't dream of doing that.
So in terms of this review, the government have given you this time period. Are we going to see anything new off the back of it?
Well, you're going to have to ask the government that rather than me. It's their review, not mine, I'm afraid.
But if nothing has changed, you say you haven't found a new revolutionary way, the science hasn't changed, then we're not going to see a return to fracking, are we?
Well, I started the interview by explaining that the science took place after the moratorium was introduced, and the science clearly demonstrates already that it's safe to do it. So I don't think it needs a long review, frankly.
OK, Francis Egan, we'll leave it there, but thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. That's Francis Egan, the Chief Executive of Quadrilla, joining us on Breakfast this morning. Right now, 19 minutes after 8.